learned even more since those words were written, and that is the power of patient capital, particularly in a number of categories. First, creating markets that have never existed, particularly for poor people. An example I would give is daylight. 2007, 1.5 billion people had no access to electricity. We took a bet on two guys with a solar lantern and a dream to eradicate kerosene. I would say for the first 7 years, it wasn't clear whether they would go bankrupt or be a runaway success. But today they've reached over 100 million people with light and electricity, and they've really helped spawn an off-grid energy revolution. So creating a market that didn't exist. And early on, a now friend of mine and I were in deep ideological battle, and he ended up becoming a very big impact investor. But he was saying, unless you get market returns, there's some level of subsidy. And so what you're really talking about is philanthropy. And I would say, no, it's not. There's real discipline. We're building viable, profitable companies, but nobody else will invest here, but you're not going to get market returns. So just call it philanthropy. And I said, and all of a sudden I stopped and I said, what do you mean by market returns? And he said, well, what the market rate is. I said, well, there is no market. So help me understand what kind of returns we should be expecting. And he said, 15 years later, just recently, he said, when you said that, it sort of stopped me. I didn't have an answer for you. And now I realize that you're actually right. So one, creating markets. Another is building trust in areas, in wounded communities, post-conflict areas. Northern Uganda, after the Civil War, where Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army really fomented civil war for 21 years. And over 1 million internally displaced people came back to land that had been fully abandoned. We partnered with Root Capital and made significant loans to a cotton gin that had a very interesting aggregation company that not only became a very successful company working with thousands of low-income smallholder farmers, but is pretty much credited for renewing the economic prosperity of the region. And the third would be creating real blueprints for private-public partnership. A company called Sanergy went into the slums of Nairobi trying to solve the problem of poor sanitation. 1 in 3 people even today have no access to a toilet, which is sort of mind-numbing. They understood where the private sector worked in terms of selling toilets where people would collect the waste on a daily basis. But the problem, of course, is the public sector piece. Once you have the waste, what do you do with it? The public sector couldn't move it. And so they had to actually build a private circular economy model where the waste is collected, it's composted, it's turned into fertilizer on which black soldier fly larvae is bred and manufactured into animal feed. It's an extraordinary model that is scaling and is also now partnering with government as a way of creating off-grid sanitation. And so we have many, many examples, as you know, Lori, but I would say those 3 are emblematic of 3 of the different real needs we have as a world to build new models and uses for patient capital.